Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom campaign from scratch so that you can see all the steps, all the bits and pieces that go into it. I'm RJ Kerr, your host as always, and today we are going to be picking up where we left off last time, where we're sort of polishing up one of the adventures that we were writing, a heist style adventure. However, if you're joining us for the very first time, then I want to give you a little bit of a recap on what we've worked on so far so you know where we are. So, as I said, we are creating a fully custom campaign. So, complete homebrew, complete from scratch, complete with our own unique domain of dread. And we've already done a lot of work on that already. We have figured out how our characters enter into this domain of dread through a portal that opens on the blood moon. We've talked about what kind of personal motivations might draw them into this adventure. We've created where they're going to land, a shanty town called Darkport that rests on the edge of an inland sea. We figured out that this inland sea is a really important part of this domain of dread and that it was once a basin of a thriving metropolis, now long flooded and in ruins. We figured out this domain of dread now contains Ovander, this elemental evil who sort of reigns over it. We have come up with our very first adventure where the characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so, discover the existence of a artifact of power that would allow them the ability to escape this domain of dread, and figuring out that this is their best course of action for getting out alive. And so now we're working on a sort of larger scope section of the adventure where the characters are getting proactive. They now have information and they know that they're seeking out this artifact. They know it's their best step. And now they're following clues and searching for this thing to kind of lead up to all the sorts of places they might be able to look for it and then eventually find this artifact. So, to give ourselves a little bit of structure in this very nebulous, very sandboxy kind of part of the adventure, we're using a node structure style. And how that works is that effectively we're creating these little nodes that are in many ways sort of like investigative scenes. They're very reminiscent of a mystery in this capacity, where they are parts of the adventure, some cases little mini adventures, some cases just simple encounters that have clues within them that the characters can discover. And then they can follow those clues to other nodes, other investigative points to find more clues, and so on and so forth, until they get the information they need and discover the suspected location of the artifact. And so this gives our characters a ton of autonomy. It gives them a lot of agency, the ability to kind of go and do and seek out whatever it is that they want to follow, while at the same time giving us as dungeon masters, game masters, sort of a structure to work with. So we're not having to create everything kind of on the fly from absolute scratch. And so we have been working on that, and we've done a number of things for it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. We have started building this out in very rough terms. We've kind of roughed out an outline for it in some various locations. We've brainstormed places that our characters might travel to and sort of done a little bit of world building this way. We've created our very first adventure using a 5-room, or well, I should say our first adventure of this portion of the campaign, using our 5-room dungeon methodology. And now we're working on a heist style adventure, one we're calling the Ghost Ship Castle Caper, that takes place in a place where a multitude of shipwrecks have been gathered around a natural stone arc off a seaside cliff, and that the ships have been broken down and repurposed into a castle like structure, becoming a Sahuagin stronghold. And here the characters are seeking a ship's log that has the last known location of the artifact in it, presumably. And so we're setting this up as a raid style adventure. And so to do that, we're riffing off of this 5-room dungeon method. And so instead, we're creating what I would call a 5-scene dungeon. And we've done most of the work for that. So I would preface this by saying that what we're going to be working on today really is putting a polish on an adventure. We've put all the bones into it. We really have created everything that we need to know to run this. But if we really want to put a high level of polish on it, maybe we're writing it for other people to run, maybe we're writing it for a convention, that kind of thing. These are the kinds of details that we would put into this. So Using the five scene structure, we've got our entry, so our characters have to find a way into the adventure. And this differs from our five room dungeon in the fact that it's not a physical place, it's an event that happens in the adventure where the characters get the chance to plan a heist. And so we filled this with information on the kinds of things that they might be able to discover prior to actually making their incursion into the stronghold. I've given them lookout points, we've given them information on the patrols, or we should say, we've written information on the patrols, we've talked about entrances, we've talked about what they might have to do to actually sneak around the facility and scout it out, and made both a skill challenge and an endurance challenge as part of that in previous episodes. We have then started working on some of the the hazards that they might encounter, and this is where we're going to pick up today. Is we're going to work on some more of these hazards and really polish them out here. But then we move to our second room here, our second scene, our setback. And in this case, again, it's not like a physical puzzle room or a trap or a specific encounter. It's what happens when things go awry. And so we gave ourselves a set of conditions that allows us to take various encounters throughout the adventure and make them active, meaning that they move out of their static locations and they begin searching or begin working and moving around the facility. Then we have a condition called alert, where now they're looking for intruders, but they haven't spotted any yet. They don't know where they are. And then alarm, when they've seen the intruders, they're raising the alarm and they're going, trying to get the whole compound on active alert. And so we have set those up. We have talked about what happens when the alarm is raised. We've talked about what happens if things go completely sideways and the characters are captured. Then it just comes down to our puzzle here, which in this case is more of a challenge. It's where is the logbook? Where is it in this stronghold? And so we have populated out a whole bunch of different spaces, giving them some descriptions. We've added little notes about some of the hazards and the treasure that are found in these places, and we're going to want to add some more to that too. That's part of the polish here. Um, but really just kind of giving ourselves a number of toys to work with and a little bit of a vibe to build off of as we run this adventure. What we haven't done is put encounters, combat encounters in all of these rooms. Instead, we've taken those and we've put those on a action groups table. And so they're still keyed to start in the different rooms here, and you'll notice there's a lot of them, a lot of activity in the stronghold. That can be characteristic of a high style campaign. Um, but what we've done here is by creating a list of this, we've made it much easier for us to move them around the facility and to make it feel like this is a living, breathing place that actually has business that goes on in it, allowing us to be a lot more active with our encounters here and not having to rely on random encounters or wandering monster tables or things like that. Although, if that's simpler, you absolutely could, as long as you're comfortable kind of riffing off of that. There's nothing wrong with that. Our last two steps here, our last two rooms in a 5 room dungeon would be our BBEG, or a big bad evil guy. In this case, we've created a climax, which is again a final challenge that the characters have to overcome to get out with their prize. And in this case, instead of having it be a climactic battle, we've added a new element to the stronghold, an envoy from a Slod-led faction who's there looking for the same logbook and is aligned with the Sahuagin that are here, meaning that now they're all looking for this logbook, and now there's more eyes actively searching, making it more difficult for the characters to escape unnoticed. And then the last step is the reward. Again, in a 5 room dungeon, this might be a physical space where there's a tangible reward, but in this case, it's the event of being able to read the ship's log and get the clue and information that they're there looking for. So, again, we've got everything we need to run this adventure for sure. We could take this to the table and we could run it as is, but we're putting polish on this because why not? We've got the time. So, let's go ahead and continue working on on our various hazards, not just sea life hazards, but other hazards we want to put into this. Because frankly, while traps are fun in a dungeon, they're extra fun in a heist because they give all kinds of opportunities for hijinks and for things to go awry. without having to get into a combat encounter, which logically leads to the raising of the alarm and that kind of thing. Um, so let's go ahead and dig into that. We want to fill out kind of what we've got in here. And we also want to maybe add some more terrestrial hazards in here because we do have some spaces that are not flooded or not even half flooded, but are fully dry and on land. So we might want to put a few things in there for that. But we'll touch on that as we go. Okay, so razor barnacles. Let's start there. Um, when I think of razor barnacles, I'm actually not really thinking about barnacles specifically. I'm really thinking about zebra mussels, which, if you're a diver or whatever, they you might have encountered these, and they will just shred you if you touch them. But wanted something kind of like that in this, where it's a contact sort of thing, where somebody could be scraped against it and get cut, and maybe put some blood in the water, especially since we're building out this blood in the water mechanic. So I'm thinking kind of simple slashing damage for this. Oh, looks like we've already got a chat comment in the chat. Jonathan Frost says, if they scream when they take damage from hazards and traps, I would use that against them, but I'm not nice. You should use that against them. Absolutely, you should. The challenge that I have encountered with that, and I've run a ton of heists at this point. There's some of my favorite things to run. Um, but the thing that I found that I was always struggling with that is, who can hear what? If you're in the next room, can you hear, what can you hear in the adjacent room? What can you hear down the hall? How loud does something have to be heard in space XYZ? And the solution that I've come up with that is I just create a simple DC where I say it's 10 plus every wall the uh, uh, you know between the source of the noise and the other people who are passively listening for it, right? And so if they're passively listening for it, I'm using their passive perception, and so that means that, like, if their passive perception is a 10 and there's a wall between them and the sound, well, then they're probably not going to notice it. If their passive perception is 15 and there's one wall between them and the sound, yeah, they're going to hear the sound, and then they might get alerted and come and activate. If they're actively looking for noises, well, then we're making active perception checks, and that becomes more variable. But that just seems to kind of work in a simple way for me. You could also come up with audible distance tables and things like that. There is some of that on the back of the new um, Dungeon Master's screen for the 5e 2024 update. If you want to use that from the D&D kind of tool set there. But I have just found that it's in a lot of ways just kind of easier for me to just have that sort of simple DC mechanic for me. It makes it really easy to kind of calculate on the fly and to know who might hear and who might not. So works for me. Highly recommend you check it out, or you try it out, I should say, and see if it works for you. Um, so before I move on, I didn't give my normal plug of this is an interactive channel. So if you have got comments, thoughts, ideas, suggestions, opinions, or things you just want to talk about, toss those into the chat. I love hearing from you guys. You think of such creative stuff, and we have such interesting conversations while we do this. All right, now without any further ado, let us create some ways that we are really going to mess with our characters. So, diabolical time. Razor barnacles. So let's think about how we might position this. We want this to be on things that the characters might have to handle. So I think, if I recall correctly, we put these on, things like the gatehouse portcullis, and things that the characters might need to grip and grab and move. And so it should be a contact sort of hazard here. And so we could say, Let's see. We've got a dexterity saving throw there. Uh, we've got a constitution saving throw there. It's probably going to be a con save for this. It makes the most sense. I'd love to mix it up and make it something else, like it's a strength check or something along those lines. But I think constitution makes the most sense in terms of the damage here. So what we can say is that razor barnacles are barnacles with I'm sure there's a more proper word to call the exterior of a barnacle instead of shells, but with shells that taper to a cutting point, to a cutting edge. When a character comes in contact with them, we're going to say when a creature, not just a character. When a creature comes in contact with them, they must make a DC. Ooh, let's see here. Should probably be relatively high, I think, because you're trying to avoid being cut. We're talking about your toughness here, and frankly, your skin thickness. So maybe we make this high. Maybe we make this a DC 18, especially since it's something that is relatively avoidable in many circumstances. They either kind of have to. So my logic on high DC stuff is that the more opportunity there is to avoid something, the higher the DC it should be to overcome it, right? Of course, I mean there's some other logical considerations. Some things might be easy or what have you. You don't have to make everything difficult, but for example, with these razor barnacles, like they really only affect the characters if they touch the thing that has these barnacles on them, right? Which means that they can really very easily avoid this hazard by just not touching that stuff. But if they're in a situation where they have to touch it, it's likely going to damage them. And so I would put it up at an 18. You could put it as high as a 20 on this. I wouldn't be shy about doing that either. But let's make it an 18 to start, and we can always massage it later. And we're going to say a Constitution saving throw. Oh, thanks, Grammarly. Thanks for letting me know I've got errors here. What is my error? Okay, sure. Let's make a DC Constitution saving throw. Or take... Ooh, what should we say? For whatever reason, 2d6 really kind of sticks with me for this. 2d6 damage. 6 slashing damage. And that's not calibrated anything. That's just kind of a gut feeling on this. If you're kind of going off the improvised damage tables that are in the new the 5e 2024 tables, they kind of go up in intervals of 1d10, and so we could certainly do that if we wanted to. You could certainly do that. Do a 1d10 or something along those lines, or maybe even a 2d10 if we want to make this really savage. And let's make a DC 18 Constitution saving throw, take 2d6 slashing damage. Say creatures take half damage on a successful save. Jonathan Frost says we were expecting at least level 2, right? Yeah, at a minimum they'd be level 2, but we're kind of calibrating this for level 3 because it's one of our, for 4 third level characters. because this is one of our later tier adventures in this sort of open investigation here. And as we said before, we have no way of knowing that the characters are going to be a certain level by the time that they reach here, but we can expect that they will have done a couple of the other investigative, scenes. They've had a couple other nodes explored before they get to this point, since it's not one of the initial clues that we've tossed in there. But there's also nothing wrong with putting things in an adventure that if the characters get to them too early, they're out of their depth. Um, Running away is always an option. Live, realizing you're out of depth and getting out of there is a very real adventuring option. Um, and it's there's nothing wrong with putting that in an adventure and creating a situation where the characters are really kind of outgunned and might need to go and reevaluate and come back to try tackling something that's a little more difficult there. Um, I think there is I think there's a tendency in a lot of games to um, to assume that every obstacle is surmountable at whatever level the characters encounter it. And I believe you should make every obstacle surmountable. There should be a way to solve every problem in the game. But that doesn't mean that you can solve that problem right now. You might, create situations where the characters have to get a little stronger or find out a little bit more information or what have you, so that they can go out and come back. Um, now, so that's always perfectly valid to put something in here along those lines. We had a couple other comments here where Jonathan Frost says, yes, a little OSR common sense. Get out of there if you were in over your head. Yeah, for sure. Mr. Max says, hello, everyone. Had to run away from my desk to pop in. LOL. Hey, good to have you here, Greg. Appreciate it. Glad you could join us. Um, yeah, so to that end, it creates some reality in the world too. One of the things that I like to warn my players um, during a session zero is, for example, I'm running a Ghost of Saltmarsh campaign right now, a local game at one of our breweries out here, um, and those are reimaginings of classic D&D adventures, right? And back in the day, when there wasn't as much worry about balancing encounters, and it was really more about the realism of them and what might be there, and it was really up to the DM to kind of modulate the situation so that the characters weren't going to be insta-killed, and that they had the opportunity to escape if they were in over their head and that sort of thing. And so, as part of my session zero, I warn people that there's 1,000 ways to die in Greyhawk, where Ghost of Saltmarsh takes place. But you could apply that logic to any D&D campaign or any tabletop RPG campaign you want to put that in. It's certainly something I would warn my characters, my players, if I was running a Shadowdark campaign. There are 1,000 ways to die in this game, and to be careful to really warn them. Because a lot of characters, a lot of players come with the metagaming sort of mindset that they can always succeed in every situation, no matter what. And that's just not the case in a real sort of world, and in a place that has some significant consequences. And so I highly recommend that if you're going to run games like that, where the characters might be forced to run away, they might be able to get in over their head, that you warn them during a session zero that that's the case. So you set them up with that expectation, and to know that that's perfectly okay, and that they can escape to live another day and to come back and fight another day. And then two, I recommend that you hit them hard early. You get them in a situation where they are in over their head early and things are going to go sideways on them unless they do something. Um, Back to the Ghost of Saltmarsh example. Um, one of the things that I really like about this Interstitial Secrets of Saltmarsh, and I apologize, there's going to be a little spoilers here if you've never played it or what have you. Not too many, but one little one, is that uh, at the beginning of that adventure, one of the first encounters that you run into is the characters get to the haunted house. They naturally sort of scope out the area because that's the human impulse to do, is to gather a little information beforehand. And there's a subtle comment about, oh, in the there's a burrow out in the garden that you could notice. And every time I have run that game, every single time, players who came to the game from from like a Forgotten Realms setting in particular, which is one of my favorite campaign settings. Don't get me wrong, but who have come from this idea of everything is always incredibly balanced, um, have this uh, tendency to ignore that burrow and to just go, okay, so there's an animal burrow, we move on. And then they get ambushed by the thing that lives in that burrow. They get ambushed by the giant weasels that live there. And every single time that that's happened, I've almost had a player death. Now, we managed to pull that out of the fire with some quick thinking and the group sort of getting them out there and running away, and that sort of thing. But it reminds characters that they need, it reminds players that this is a place with consequences and they need to tread carefully as adventurers. There's nothing wrong with running adventures that are different from that where every puzzle is solvable at every instance. If that's the kind of game you want to run, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I personally really like to run games where there is some significant consequence and characters really have to think about what they're doing if they want to get out of every situation alive. So that's my little diatribe on that. And apologies for the tangent, but it's something that I think is valuable to think about when you're writing your adventures. Is how hard are you willing to hit your players, and knowing that there's no wrong answer there. It's just a question of preference. Um, okay, so uh, let's get a couple. Let's keep working on this. So we've talked about Razor Barnacles. I really want to work on this blood in the water mechanic because that was a really cool idea from you all. Um, and it really fits in well to our theme here, where we've got Sahuagin, which is our kind of our shark people, and we've got actual sharks in here, and this idea of sensing sort of injury and perhaps being attracted. So I want to think about how we want to manage this. And we came up with the idea that it possibly summons that injured characters in the water, like injury in the water, possibly summons um, sharks or Sahuagin because of the blood in the water here. But the question is how easy is it to summon and what shows up? And that's something we're thinking about. Well, let's see. We got another comment real quick. We've got Mr. Mech says, is it possible to give them an extremely difficult enemy that can act like a barrier to an area in hopes that they come back higher levels, like an undead ogre, keeping them from accessing part of the map? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that sometimes is kind of a good safeguard if you have a particular area of your map that is just, you know, really balanced for a much higher level, right? And so let's say that you're doing a campaign that starts characters at level 1, and it's very sandboxy. They can go in all kinds of different places, but you have a part of this world that you wrote for level 5 characters. You know, you don't want your level 1s, your level 2s, your level 3s stumbling into that place. And so having kind of that guardian character, that guardian sort of NPC that kind of sets the tone for what's ahead is actually just good storytelling, to be honest with you. You're telegraphing the sorts of challenges that the characters might encounter in this space. You're giving players a little bit of insight on what they might want to prepare for, setting them up to be successful if you do that. And then you're putting that sort of that blockage in there to kind of keep them fenced out of an area that's gonna get them TPK'd. Um, in fact, that's such good storytelling that in the hero's journey, there that is known as a threshold guardian. So in storytelling, that is like an actual physical role that gets used, and so there's 100% nothing wrong with doing that. I think it's a great idea in a lot of circumstances, especially if you're really trying to set your characters up for success, which I think you should. Um, all right, so blood in the water. How sensitive should our sharks and Sahuagin be to blood in the water? Um, we could make this as simple as hmm, we could make this as simple as a perception check on their part. Um, um, but I kind of so I kind of like the idea of this. I kind of like in my mind, I have this vision of you've got sort of these patrolling groups that are moving throughout the stronghold, and they are, and they could encounter lingering blood in the water, and now they have a trail to follow, a trail to investigate. That they can do their own kind of survival or perception checks. Um, and follow through with where the characters are. It might give an active group, it might put an active group on alert and lead them to raise the alarm when they find the characters. Um, what I'm not sure I want to do for this is it would be far easier to simply make this a detection DC. And just say like, oh, they get injured, uh, you know, creatures in a certain radius make a perception check and they sense the blood in the water. But I just, it would be easy to do that. And I don't know that there's anything wrong with that. I don't personally like the feel of it. I like the idea of finding a trail and now the characters are being hunted and they might not know it. Um, so So the question is, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make that actionable in this encounter without making it so bogged down, or in this adventure without making it so bogged down that it's just a pain in the butt to run as a DM? Let's think about that for a minute. We got a couple other comments. Jonathan Frost says, "Oh, we could delve into Campbell and the hero's journey, but that's another video." Yeah, absolutely, we can. In fact, we're already using Campbell and the hero's journey in this. Um, the story circle is just a simplified version of that, and so we're using the same story circle setup as this to kind of guide our campaign structure. And I use the story circle in this as opposed to the full hero's journey because I think it's a little kind of easier to grapple with for the first time when you're first delving into this because there's what like 13 steps in the hero's journey or something along those lines. Um, but you can absolutely use the hero's journey to kind of guide you in the creation of your campaign structure. In fact, I encourage it because you don't necessarily need to railroad your characters to make it kind of fit. You're just creating seminal moments that change the direction of the story as you go through. And I really would like that in the next time we build another proper campaign, that we use the full hero's journey for that. Because steps like crossing the threshold and resurrection and coming back with the elixir and that sort of thing are all kind of cool things that I think lend themselves well to this sort of fantasy setting. And we get a chance to talk about archetypes and all that kind of stuff too. That being said, if you guys want me to do a video on the hero's journey and how that affects TTRPG storytelling, I would be more than happy to do that. Just let me know, and we can do a special live stream where we talk about that. Happy to do it. Let's see here. And then Mr. Mex says, thank you. That is exactly how I was thinking it would work in terms of the Threshold Guardian. Fantastic. Cool. So let's do this. All right. So blood in the water. Let's say I don't want to get rid of my original note yet, so I'm just going to kind of return, and kind of put it down there for a moment. We're going to say, hmm, um, when a character receives an injury in the water, or we're going to say, or enters the water with an unattended injury, they leave an invisible, but notice they leave an invisible blood trail as they explore. Put an X on the map to note the origin of this blood trail. Any action group including Sahuagin and or sharks. I don't know why we're capitalizing that. We haven't capitalized it so far. Automatically detects this blood trail and begins following it. Have these action groups make wisdom, survival checks, contested against. Have these action groups make wisdom survival checks contested against the character's dexterity, stealth checks. For each room, the action group explores. For each group, the action group follows the trail. Okay, so this is probably going to need some tweaking, but this is kind of off the top of my head here. Where my idea is that we have a situation, right, where the characters have an injury, and I want to say either receive an injury or they have an unintended injury, because I kind of have the idea that maybe if they've been using things like healers kits or what have they to kind of patch up wounds, or they've taken a short rest or that kind of stuff, that perhaps they don't leave this. Because they've taken the time to burn a resource, they've taken the time to spend a little extra time inside this compound, they've taken the risk of doing that. And so we want to kind of make that pay off in some capacity. And so if they have that injury or an unintended injury and they enter the water, they start leaving this intangible trail of blood. So it's not like they're leaving, they can see this red streak of blood kind of falling through the water. It's more of something that these sharks, these Sahuagin, can sense in the water, because they're evolved to do so. And so make it easier ourselves on a DM. We kind of put an X where this trail starts. And on our map, I print out a version of the map for this and put a little token on there for that. If I'm doing this on D&D Beyond maps or something like that, I might have a custom token that I put on there. So, it's visible for me, having it hidden, but not visible for our players. And then have the hunt begin. Have the Sahuagin and the sharks who discover it have to make a series of checks to follow it. And I would run this in a very specific way, personally. I would have the characters make one stealth check and let that check ride. And I frequently would do this for the heist. So, so effectively, they make a stealth check every time, and that stealth check is good so long as the situation remains the same as far as the characters are concerned, right? So, if they don't know they're being hunted, they don't make a new stealth check. If they don't know they're passing a room with bad guys in it, uh, they don't make a new stealth check. If they know something's changed and they're changing their behavior, they make a new stealth check. Um, but then the pursuers have to make a series of these checks, these wisdom checks against this singular dexterity check, because we want it to be harder to follow the trail the farther away the characters have gotten. So the characters have been moving at speed and given some distance here. That trail is going to become more dilute. It's going to become harder to follow. And so by putting more checks in there for the action group, we put a little bit more effort on the DM side here, but we create an the increasing likelihood that the Sahuagin and the sharks following it are going to fail that check. Um, and we might decide it's a perception check instead of survival check. That's just kind of off the top of my head. Um, so we might tweak that. But we've created a contested situation now where the party might escape just through dumb luck. They might not even know they're pursued, but now we as the DM know that there is this hunting mechanic going on. We know that there's something tracking the characters. And that could lead to a really dynamic sort of encounter. And we might even foretell that in the sense that maybe the characters notice their pursuers before their pursuers notice them, and now they've got to hide. Now they got to make another stealth check. Now they got to get out of the way and think about what they're going to do. And we can have this moment where you have maybe the sharks kind of swimming through while the characters are holding their breath, kind of up against the wall, watching this creature pass them by, trying not to get caught. Um, so I like the mechanic that way, and it's why I would run it that way. But I explain it because I would need to rewrite it if I was going to explain it to somebody else. I know how I would run this personally. That's all the notes I've got to put down for myself on this. But if I was going to say write this for publication, this would be a much longer section where I would really kind of write out that procedure, so that the DM doesn't feel like they're making a million checks all the time and alerting their characters that they're being hunted by having them constantly make stealth checks. Real quick, we got several more comments in the chat here. Wonderful. Love to see that. Mr. Mech says, that sounds awesome. Any information on being better at this wonderful game is welcome. I presume that's in relation to the Campbell and the Hero's Journey video. Yeah, happy to do it. I would love to talk about that. I'm a storytelling nerd. It would be a lot of fun to dive into those details. Jonathan Frost says, what DC medicine check to fix the issue? You're just kind of binding a wound. I might even make it a DC 10. And I wouldn't make it exceptionally high to do it. The key here is that I wouldn't warn the characters. I wouldn't warn the players that this is a hazard they're dealing with. I would allow them to stumble into it. And specifically, because that's part of the reason why you make the blood trail invisible, that kind of deal. But this is a hazard that they don't know is there, and if they're really thinking about it, if it occurs to them that the blood in the water might attract sharks, then we want to reward them for thinking about ways to overcome that. That means they're really engaging with the story and diving into the world, and that's good. We want them to do that. So I would keep the DC low. Mr. X says, do you try to keep your enemies within the campaign similar in theme in all the areas written out, or is it okay to use whatever enemies typically fit the environment? It is okay to use whatever enemies fit the environment. It's okay to kind of go into a theme. I will say that if you follow a theme, the players will catch on to that, and they'll kind of have an idea of what to expect. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Because sometimes you want to telegraph those challenges that they're going to encounter. Uh, I'd say, in most circumstances, you don't want them to stumble into a lich, right? Or stumble into an ancient dragon that is hostile to them, that kind of deal. Um, you want there to be some kind of warning. You want them to be kind of prepared for those kind of high level encounters. Um, because otherwise it's just going to be a wipe. It's just going to be a TPK, and that's just not fun for anybody. Using, uh, so having some of those themes um, can can alert savvy players to what's to come and let them kind of think through this and think like adventurers and plan and prepare themselves for this kind of stuff. So something, it's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It can be fun though to toss in some oddities in there, and it might be other monsters that are native to the environment but aren't really thematic. For example, if you have a snowy mountain fortress that's full of undead, having a yeti pop up in there occasionally might would make sense and would be kind of cool and kind of mix things up here. Um, you know, uh, you can also come up with unusual combinations. I think Jonathan Ross says here, weird enemy combos are always interesting. Look at the special abilities and try to find synergies. I mean, that's a good strategy too. That enemies that kind of work together. That's one of the suggestions that like Chris Perkins, one of the former designers for D&D, gave, where he talks about that unusual combinations add to your story, and they kind of upset player expectations and create unanticipated moments, which is really cool. Um, and then Jonathan Frost says, yeah, the theme of sharks in this, cough cough, land sharks, cough cough, yeah, yeah, clearly I'm using a theme in this as well, but we have managed to play on that theme in an interesting way by putting bullets in here in addition to regular sharks and regular Sahuagins and that kind of thing. And so, it's nothing wrong with using a theme, but feel free to play on that theme. Don't feel like you need to stick to it rigidly. All right. We're having some great conversation tonight. So let's go ahead and you know what? Before we move on for this blood in the water thing, I'm gonna check the Sahuagin and the Shark stat block. Because I'm willing to bet they don't have bonuses to survival, but I'm willing to bet they have bonuses to perception. So let's check that out real quick. So monsters, got D&D Beyond here in an adjacent window. So who again? Sahuagin Warrior, the new stat block for that. Yeah, perception +5. And let's try Shark. Let's say we know we've got Reef Sharks and Hunter Sharks. Let's check that out. Hunter Sharks have a +2 to perception. Reef Sharks have a +2 to perception. So yeah, so let's set our baddies up for a little success on this. And let's make this a perception check instead of a survival check. Building off of those stat blocks there. We could go the reverse and make it a little more difficult for them by using survival as opposed to perception, but I think this is something they're attuned to. Blood in the water is something that they're paying attention to, and so perception makes sense to me, as well as survival. So, cool, we've got that. Now, I want to work a little bit on some of the land traps for this. Some of the land hazards. We've got one for rotting wood, which I really like. We've got this glass trap idea, which I think Jonathan Frost gave us here. And I really like that idea. I need to figure out where we're going to put that in what capacity and what the glass trap is. But the idea that glass being almost invisible underwater really is kind of a sinister thing, and I applaud being sinister as a DM sometimes. Um, so so we got to figure out a way to put that in here. If not here, it's somewhere else. It's a cool idea. But let's think about what other kinds of hazards we might have in addition to rotted wood and that sort of thing that are in the land. So let's look at what spaces we have. Um, so let's see. Crow's Nest. That seems like a place for rotted wood. Stone Arc. Stone Arch is got should have something else. We don't have to put a hazard everywhere in here, but we can use this to kind of think about the sort of hazards that we might put into place here. Um, let's see. There should be something for the stone arch. Rotted wood doesn't fit here. We need something else if we're going to do something in the stony passageways, that kind of deal. Um, treasure room 2 has got some rock and stone. I don't think they would have the rotted out planks in here, that kind of deal. We do have the needle trap on the door, so maybe that's taken care of with that, but maybe we want to put another kind of hazard in there, something inside, something to add a little extra deterrent if the characters decide to veer off into this treasure room and search that, and we would even that out with some decent treasure in the space here to make it kind of worth their while. Um, let's see here. Yeah, well, maybe we don't need a lot of land traps. We only don't have that many spaces where a trap is going to fit, I think, for that. So as much as I want to do that, maybe we don't need as much of it. So let's start here then with the rotted wood and get that knocked out in the time that we have left this evening. Um, so rotted wood isn't so much a trap as it is a hazard, meaning that it's not necessarily hidden. And they don't really make that distinction in the literature here, but it's a personal distinction that I make where a trap is something that's trapped or something that's secret is intentionally hidden, right? Meaning that it is not going to be obvious to the casual observer. Something that is a hazard or is concealed is something that is just sort of, uh, you know, maybe not immediately obvious, but absolutely could be picked up on a passive perception check. And so I allow passive perception checks to notice hazards and to notice concealed things. I don't allow them to notice secrets and traps. It's just kind of my personal distinction on that there, and it's how I like to run it in terms of the difficulty of finding things. Um, so I could see the rotted wood here though as a hazard, where you could see soft wood and that kind of deal. If you were paying attention, you might notice that it's rotted out. So we want to give an option to find to find this kind of thing, and then we want to talk about what happens if you activate it, if you step on it. Before we do that, let's see here. Mr. Mech says, could the glass or crystal underwater be used like a maze to try to increase a sense of dread and making an easy swim not so easy to swim? Yeah, it could. And I like that idea. I don't know how it would fit into this particular adventure, but I think we could fit it in somewhere. If not here, then somewhere else. Because I do kind of like the idea of, because that makes me think of, like, you put a glass jar in a tank, and a creature who goes in that can't necessarily realize that they don't have access to the surface. It's not immediately obvious, and so that creates a dangerous situation. It's a reason why you shouldn't do it with things like turtles and air breathing pets. But it is something that would create a sense of dread in our characters, and make put them in a situation that is accidentally terrifying. Cool, I like that. So we're gonna do glass trap. Let's say glass maze. Cool. and we'll work that in somewhere. I like that. Good one, Greg. Good one, Mr. Max. Appreciate it. Okay, rotted wood. So let's say here some sections of wooden planks found throughout the stronghold have begun to rot due to constant exposure to water. Any character with a passive perception of, let's say, 14 or higher notices these hazards automatically. If noticed, they are easily avoided. If a section of rotted wood goes unnoticed, character who steps on it must make a DC 12 dexterity saving. Oh, I don't know why I put in that parentheses. Saving throw or fall to the level below. Constant, not constants. Okay, cool. Yeah, I made the DC on that one relatively low. Frankly, just because I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily terribly difficult for the characters to catch themselves as they begin to fall. There's a chance they won't. There's a chance they will. High dex characters probably will. Low dex characters probably won't. It's not a problem. And I have also not listed out what happens in the fall because we can have a lot of situations where we have rotted wood in dry areas and they fall into other dry areas, in which case they take bludgeoning damage if they fall, or they fall into flooded areas, in which case they might not take any damage and might splash and creates a noise, drawing in curious action groups in the area, that kind of deal. Or they might take, if it's exceptionally high fall, they might take damage by hitting water too. And we could outline that if we wanted to. I would probably improvise it simply because, the fall damage is pretty standardized. 1d6 bludgeoning damage per every 10 feet that you fall if you're using the D&D system here. And so it's just kind of easy to kind of calculate that on a standard sort of on the fly. And then, I might say that that damage is halved if they fall into water and there's a splash or something along those lines. Kind of assuming that they're not going to fall from a high enough height that the water is, like concrete. But giving me some room to kind of play around with that too. So yeah, that's what I would do with that. Cool. All right, we are pretty much at the end of our time, and it occurs to me that I have not done my typical shameless self promo, and so we're going to do that real fast. I am not just a guy who writes adventures on the internet. I am also a professional dungeon master who runs games online and in person if you live in the Huntsville, Alabama area. I have got a whole bunch of games on startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr that are available looking for spots. Including we've got a Tomb of Annihilation group that is looking for one more spot to join. And before we get started, that's a bi-weekly adventure. We're playing on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Central Time if you're interested in that. So that's an every other week kind of deal. If you want to check out my ratings and that sort of thing and see if I'm worthwhile, you can check out all my reviews here. You can see my GMing style. You can ask questions. If there's not a game that interests you, you want to do something a little more custom, you can request a booking on here. Or you can come find me in person in Huntsville. If you want to do an in-person game, happy to do that kind of deal as well. So, with that, we're going to say shameless self plug over. Again, you can check me out at startplaying.games/gm/RJ Kerr, and that link is in the description of this video. But that brings us to the end here. So, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really am glad to be back on our Monday night swing here and back into the rhythm of this adventure. We're going to pick up again as usual on Wednesday. That slot's already been scheduled. And if you have been enjoying this series, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that stuff helps keep the channel growing, helps more people find us here, and gives us some more fun as we build out this Domain of Dread and our custom campaign. So again, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday. Talk to you soon.